Hey everyone, today we have an incredible story that might just change the way you view faith and the afterlife. It's about a remarkable journey of a woman named Saira, a devoted Muslim mother whose life was turned upside down after a near-death experience that revealed unexpected truths. Her encounter with a divine presence and the insights she gained will leave you speechless. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. Before we jump in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more mind-blowing stories. I was living a typical busy life until an incident changed everything I believed about God and the afterlife. At 47, I was a devoted mother in Syracuse, New York, juggling my role as a pharmacy technician at Walgreens with raising two teenagers alongside my husband, Fahad. Our home was a simple two-story house, filled with the routines of daily life. My upbringing in a strict Muslim family meant that faith was deeply ingrained in me. I prayed 5 times a day without fail, observed Ramadan, and followed the teachings I had known since childhood. My parents had immigrated from Pakistan before I was born, and they worked hard to ensure that our religious traditions were preserved in America. One winter morning started off like any other. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the kids before school. The news droned on about a snowstorm expected later that week. With a busy day ahead, I was already planning to pick up groceries after work. I had no idea that a silent danger lurked in our home. The carbon monoxide detector had been out of commission for weeks. The batteries had died, and somehow, both Fahad and I had overlooked it during our usual home checks. Our aging furnace had developed a crack in its heat exchanger, quietly leaking poisonous gas into the house. As I made lunches, a wave of dizziness hit me. I brushed it off as fatigue. My daughter Layla complained of a headache and wanted to skip school, while my son Rami was still upstairs getting ready. By then, Fahad had already left for his engineering job downtown. But things quickly took a turn. The dizziness got worse, and the kitchen began to spin. My vision blurred, and I reached for my phone to call 911, but my fingers felt heavy and unresponsive. The last thing I remember is seeing Layla's frightened face before I collapsed on the kitchen floor. Despite feeling sick herself, Layla managed to call for emergency help. Within minutes, firefighters arrived and detected dangerously high levels of carbon monoxide in the house. They acted quickly, rescuing us just in time. I was unconscious, Layla was barely able to walk, and Rami, the memory of that morning haunts me. I came so close to losing everything. As I stood in the shower later, still reeling from the shock, I suddenly collapsed. I found out later that for 4 minutes and 37 seconds, my heart had stopped beating. I was clinically dead. Can you imagine that? For those moments, time felt endless, and everything I thought I knew about life and death turned upside down. Looking back now, it all feels surreal. I had spent years praying, believing I understood the afterlife and what comes next. But in those 4 minutes, all my certainty was shattered. It was a stark reminder that despite all the lessons I had taken in without question, I was far from prepared for what I experienced. The doctor later told me I was remarkably fortunate. If Layla hadn't called for help when she did, or if the first responders had taken a minute longer, things would have ended differently for all of us. Just a slight increase in carbon monoxide levels could have sealed our fate. But looking back, I know that luck had nothing to do with it. What unfolded next was a destined revelation, opening my eyes to profound truths. I've always measured my life by how well I adhered to the rules of my faith. I asked myself, did I pray at the right times? Was I modest enough in my dress? Did my actions reflect the teachings of a faithful Muslim woman? These questions occupied my mind daily, dictating my choices and actions. My relationship with Fahad was built on this common understanding. We met at an event at the Islamic Society of Central New York. Like mine, his family valued marrying within our faith. We shared those principles with our children, sending them to weekend Islamic school and instilling the importance of our beliefs in their lives. My job at Walgreens sometimes tested my steadfastness. I often found myself filling prescriptions that clashed with Islamic teachings, or dealing with customers whose lifestyles seemed to contradict everything I valued. But I constantly reminded myself that judgment was not mine to wield. Only Allah had that authority. That particular morning, as I looked out the kitchen window, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Layla had just received a full scholarship to Syracuse University, and Rami's grades had finally started to pick up after a rough start in high school. To top it off, Fahad had just earned a promotion. Everything appeared to align perfectly for a family that seemed to abide by every rule and expectation. While gazing outside, I noticed the neighborhood kids bundled up against the cold, waiting for their school bus. Life seemed to be flowing smoothly, yet I had no idea that everything was about to change forever. As I was going about my morning, I noticed Mrs. Robinson next door shoveling her driveway. I thought it might be nice for Fahad to lend her a hand later. Life felt stable and predictable, and in that moment, everything appeared so secure. Little did I know that in just a few hours, my entire understanding of existence, life, death, God, truth, would collapse like a fragile house of cards caught in a gust of wind. People often talk about how near-death experiences transform lives, but that's such an understatement for what unfolded for me. It wasn't just a transformation. It was as if I had been given a second chance, reborn with fresh vision. For the first time, I truly saw the world around me. The insights I gained during those 4 minutes and 37 seconds would profoundly affect not just my own life, but also the lives of those close to me. That day, while I was still caught up in my regular routine, I couldn't have imagined that by sunset, I would carry an incredibly vital message, one so urgent that I would dedicate my life to sharing it with anyone willing to listen. This message encompassed what lies ahead after this life, the actual essence of God, and the significant choices we make that resonate through eternity. When my heart stopped, everything shifted. Contrary to the stories of bright tunnels and guiding lights, my experience was more akin to being thrust into icy water, a shocking plunge that reverberated through my entire being. I found myself floating above my body in the ambulance, observing the frantic efforts of the paramedics below. Their voices seemed distant, like I was hearing them through a foggy window. I saw one medic performing chest compressions while another was readying the defibrillator. I watched my own pale, motionless form, still dressed in my blue Walgreens uniform, with the silver necklace that Layla had gifted me for our anniversary draped around my neck. Oddly enough, despite the situation, I didn't feel any fear. It was more like watching someone else's life unfold on a screen. I noticed little things I would normally overlook, like a coffee stain on the sleeve of the young paramedic and a crack in the ambulance's ceiling that strikingly resembled a question mark. Then everything faded to darkness, not the kind that comes with shutting one's eyes, but a deep, weighty darkness that felt almost sentient. I sensed myself being drawn deeper into it, as if an unseen force was guiding me. Suddenly I was no longer alone. A presence enveloped me, beautiful yet intimidating, unlike anything I had ever experienced. I sensed something powerful around me, even though I couldn't see it. It felt like an angel, but not the kind with delicate wings and a halo that you find on greeting cards. This presence was ancient and formidable, and it sent shivers through my very soul. Instead of speaking in words, it communicated with me through vivid images and deep understanding. Suddenly, my entire life unfolded before me. It wasn't just a replay of my actions. I began to see the ripple effects they had caused. I recalled a moment when I was unkind to a colleague and how that had brightened or darkened her entire day. Then there was the time I assisted an elderly woman with her medications. That simple act of kindness gave her a glimmer of hope when she needed it the most. What struck me the hardest, though, was a revelation about my commitment to Islam. I witnessed people I had encouraged to adopt stricter religious practices, thinking I was leading them to enlightenment. Instead, I realized that my well-meaning guidance had, in fact, pushed them further away from the truth. In the presence of this magnificent entity, I felt my arguments wilt and lose significance. The angel then unveiled scenes from history that were completely unfamiliar to me, revealing truths about the Prophet Muhammad that had been altered or obscured over time. It was as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes. As I absorbed this overwhelming wisdom, the shrouded surroundings began to shift. I could perceive countless souls navigating through the darkness, thousands, perhaps millions. Some souls were being drawn upward toward a light I had previously overlooked. Others, however, were slipping downward, their spiritual forms fading as they went. The angel helped me understand that the fate of each soul wasn't by chance. Instead, it was a direct consequence of their beliefs and the lives they led. I saw Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and various spiritual seekers all grappling with the realization that their genuine beliefs hadn't sufficed. I could see their choices laid bare before them. Some souls grasped their mistake too late, reaching out to Allah, various prophets, or gods, only to find silence in response. The angel made it clear that there was a singular path to the light above, and a singular truth capable of saving a soul from the engulfing dark. This powerful being guided me closer to those descending souls, and the experience was nothing short of horrifying. Their anguish enveloped me like a tangible force. In that moment, I caught glimpses of individuals I had known in life, good-hearted people who prayed 5 times a day and dedicated themselves to charity, yet they were being relentlessly drawn downward. Their prayers to Allah reverberated in the emptiness, having no effect on their fate. In the heart of Syracuse, New York, I spotted Fahad, a brother who had led prayers at our mosque for many years. As he made his way down, I could sense the dimming of his spirit. Next to him was Sister Fatima, who dedicated her time to teaching our kids the Quran. The expressions on their faces mirrored the sorrow I was feeling. It hit us all that our faith may not have been placed where it should have been. Suddenly, an angel appeared and revealed to me a heart-wrenching truth. I saw the souls of children who had passed away, including those from our very own community. Unlike the adults, however, these innocent souls seemed to be lifted towards the light. The angel understood my pain and sadness, sharing the realization that these children hadn't yet been tied down by misguided beliefs. It offered me comfort, but at the same time, it deepened my grief over the parents who would never hold their children again. As we traversed this divine space, I noticed something curious. Some souls appeared to be adorned with bright chains, not chains of metal, but of beliefs and traditions that had tethered them in life. Even my own chains were visible, radiant with exquisite Arabic script and Islamic symbols. They were stunning yet suffocating, pulling me down. Then the angel guided me to what resembled an enormous courtroom, crafted entirely from luminous light. Souls were brought forth to face a judge whose brilliance was overwhelming. Each life was scrutinized not merely by actions, but by beliefs chosen in the face of truth. I watched a woman from our mosque be shown all the moments she'd encountered Christian missionaries, every church she'd passed, every gospel message she had heard and dismissed. Each instance bore witness against her. The truth had called, yet she clung to the beliefs she was accustomed to. When my time came, the weight of judgment settled over me like a thick fog. I recalled every time I had proudly spoken the Shahada, every instance I had taught my children that Jesus was merely a prophet, and the disdain with which I regarded the Bible as corrupted. All of this lay bare before me, and I felt the gravity of my mistakes almost suffocating. Unlike many other souls I had observed, my judgment wasn't final. I realized I was shown all of this for a purpose. The angel communicated that I would have an opportunity to return, to share what I had learned. But first, I needed to witness more, much more. We began to ascend towards the radiant light, and as we did, I could sense my chains of misunderstanding gradually evaporating. The light enveloped me, not harsh or blinding, but as comforting as a warm embrace. In a moment of pure love and clarity, I started to glimpse realms that were astonishingly beautiful, one more breathtaking than the next. However, the angel who accompanied me assured me that these were not the multiple heavens I had learned about in my faith. Suddenly, I encountered Jesus Christ, but he wasn't the figure I had come to know from Islamic teachings. He was so much more, God himself. His presence wrapped me in an overwhelming love that felt as though it could tear me apart. All the misconceptions I held about him crumbled away like leaves caught in a strong autumn breeze. What I thought I understood about the Trinity was reframed completely. It wasn't 3 separate gods as I had been taught, but rather one God expressed in 3 persons. It was a profound mystery that, in an instant, made complete sense. Trying to explain this was like showing color to someone who had only ever seen black and white. You truly cannot grasp it until you experience it for yourself. Next, the angel revealed moments from real history, not the accounts I had been familiar with. I witnessed the crucifixion of Jesus, an event I had believed to be a fabrication, followed by his resurrection. I saw the early days of the Christian church and the spreading of its messages. Then, the narrative shifted to how various religions, including Islam, had manipulated these fundamental truths. Something hit me hard as I realized how political motives and human desires had influenced the faith I had embraced so wholeheartedly. The real story of Muhammad was starkly different from the idealized version I had revered. This revelation wasn't meant to condemn, but rather to clarify why many sincere individuals had been misled. I grasped how Satan had meticulously woven deception through the ages, preying on humanity's yearning for structure and rules, steering countless people away from true salvation. The journey continued as the angel guided me to what was like an expansive library, but instead of books, it was filled with the life stories of individuals. Here, I observed not only the paths people had taken, but also the ones they could have chosen. I caught glimpses of alternate versions of my own life, where I had embraced the truth sooner. I envisioned my children growing up free from the weight of false beliefs, and my husband and I leading others to true freedom rather than deeper entrapment. Then, the reality struck hard. I was shown the faces of those I had influenced, friends I had encouraged to deepen their dedication to Islam, neighbors I had invited to the mosque, and even my own children whom I had guided to dismiss Christian teachings. The angel conveyed to me the weight of this understanding. I would have to account not only for my choices, but also for the paths of those I had swayed. In the depths of my journey, I found myself grappling with the consequences of my actions and their effect on those around me. But amidst the heaviness was a flicker of hope. I began to realize that my brush with death could actually serve a greater purpose. The thought that my story might help others break free from their own chains of doubt energized me. An angel showed me faces of Muslims who would listen to my experience and start questioning their beliefs, igniting their own paths toward truth. Then everything shifted dramatically. I felt as if I was standing in a magnificent throne room, a space that radiated an indescribable presence of God. It was unlike any version of Allah I had worshipped. This presence was intensely personal and deeply loving, a father who embraced me for who I truly was. In that divine atmosphere, my entire perspective on salvation was altered. I saw souls entering heaven, and what struck me was that it wasn't their good deeds alone that opened the gates. Each person had placed their trust in Jesus Christ. Their lives were reflections of that faith, expressed through sacraments and good works ignited by the Holy Spirit. This was a revelation. I finally grasped that salvation is a precious gift of grace, obtained through faith and made visible through action. The angel then illuminated how my religious practices, which I thought would secure my salvation, had actually stood in my way. My commitment to Islamic law, my prayers, and fasting were not the pathways I believed they were. Instead, they had become obstacles, attempts to earn what could only be graciously given through faith in Jesus and the acceptance of his sacrifice. I was allowed to witness actual moments in heaven. Souls who had just arrived were meeting Jesus. Some were Muslims like myself, while others identified as Hindus, Buddhists, or even atheists. What resonated with me was the shock in their voices as many exclaimed, "But I was so convinced I was right." The love they experienced was overpowering. Yet for many, it was too late to turn back. Then came an unexpected vision. The saints from Christian history appeared before me, but they weren't the distant, untouchable figures I had imagined. They were vibrant, full of life, and astonishingly humble. I watched in awe as they worshipped alongside those who had once been Muslims, celebrating the truth they found during their earthly lives. There was no hierarchy or superiority, just a pure, shared joy in God's grace. However, the most challenging part of my journey lay ahead. I was shown hell, not merely as a separation from God, but as a realm of genuine torment. The flames represented an anguish so profound that it seemed almost unbearable, a stark reminder of eternal suffering. The absence of God's presence can seem like the most profound torment. Imagine a place that feels more like a vacuum than a refuge. The fire there is not just a physical blaze. It's a symbol of unending pain. I encountered religious leaders I once admired, people who had guided countless souls down the wrong path. Their suffering only deepened as they noticed the cascade of lives negatively affected by their teachings. Each individual drawn in by their influence only magnified their agony, yet curiously, they accepted the fairness of their plight. Then came a revelation that really struck me. Countless Muslims were fervently praying, but it was as if their prayers hit an unyielding brass ceiling, not because they weren't heard, but due to a flawed understanding of God. I realized how Satan twisted their earnestness, trapping them in a cycle of religious rituals while they overlooked true salvation found in faith in Jesus Christ, active participation in the sacraments, and genuine good works rooted in sincere belief. Suddenly, my own future flashed before my eyes. If I chose to go back to life, I foresaw a challenging road ahead: rejection from my Muslim community, strife within my family, and whispers of betrayal. Yet amidst these struggles, I visualized the lives I could influence with my testimony. The angel made it clear that the path would be tough, but it would carry eternal importance. And then, something extraordinary happened. I faced a choice. I could either remain in this comforting paradise or return to share my newfound insights. The peace of heaven was intoxicating, and I felt an urge to stay. But when I envisioned the lives I could change, including my family's, a sense of purpose surged within me. Before I was sent back, the angel granted me one last vision: my own judgment day, but this time as someone who had fulfilled my mission on earth. There I stood before Jesus, not as a figure of judgment, but as my Savior, hearing the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That joy overshadowed any short-term struggles I might face upon returning. Coming back to my body was an overwhelming experience. It felt as though I were being constricted through a narrow passage. My chest ached from the CPR, and the stark hospital lights were jarring after the divine light I had known. The first familiar face I saw was that of Fahad, tears rolling down his face as he grasped my hand. Our children surrounded us, their eyes swollen from crying. The doctors informed me that I was fortunate. Most people in my condition wouldn't have made it. Carbon monoxide poisoning typically doesn't leave survivors. Yet, when those individuals left the room, I knew it wasn't just a stroke of luck. I rushed to share what I had witnessed, but Fahad dismissed my claims as mere confusion from a lack of oxygen. Layla and Rami exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody wanted to accept that their devoted Muslim wife and mother had experienced something so profound. The toughest part came after I returned home. News spread quickly among our Muslim community, and friends I'd known for years suddenly stopped reaching out. The imam paid a visit, suggesting I might benefit from psychiatric assistance. My parents, all the way in Pakistan, called in tears, urging me to retract my statements. Fahad was initially understanding, believing this phase would pass, but things escalated when I began attending a local church instead of the mosque. I found solace in participating in their sacraments and engaging in charitable work fueled by my newfound beliefs. Tensions mounted as Fahad would discover me praying the rosary or reading the Bible, finally grasping verses that had been twisted in my previous education. We argued over how to explain my journey to the children and whether I was suffering a mental breakdown. But gradually, an incredible shift occurred. Other Muslims quietly reached out to me, sharing their own doubts and questions. A close friend from the mosque admitted she had been secretly going to church and was curious about the sacraments. As time passed, about 6 months after my initial experience, an invitation came my way to speak at a small church. I was terrified, but once I began to share my story, an incredible sense of calm washed over me. The words poured out, and I noticed tears among the crowd, including some familiar Muslim faces who had come out of curiosity. That day, 3 individuals chose to accept Christ, deciding to demonstrate their faith through baptism and commit to a life of good deeds. Fast forward to now, 2 years later, and our home has turned into an unofficial hub for seekers. Each week, people from various backgrounds drop by with questions. They include former Muslims, skeptics, and anyone who has encountered their own supernatural experiences. Fahad hasn't embraced my new faith yet, but he has softened over time. Just last week, I caught him reading the Gospel of John while he thought I was resting. Though the death threats have mostly diminished, I still receive some unpleasant messages on social media. Yet none of that seems significant anymore. Once you've glimpsed the truth about eternity, the challenges of this temporary life feel inconsequential. My greatest joy emerged just 3 months ago. A little while back, Layla shared something profound with me. She revealed she had been quietly reaching out to Jesus, hoping for a personal experience with his love, something that blossomed while she was going through the Bible I had given her. This led her to want to embrace the sacraments and embody her faith through charitable deeds. Rami is still coming to terms with everything, but I really admire his curiosity. He's asking some insightful questions. Every night, I pause to thank the heavens for a second chance, for the opportunity to guide others toward the truth. I realize my journey may sound unbelievable. Just 2 years ago, I would have scoffed at it myself, yet I can't shake off the memories of what I saw and felt. Keeping this to myself isn't an option anymore. There are too many souls wandering off course, just like I once did. I believe if even one person finds clarity through my story, then the sacrifices I've made are absolutely worth it. If this resonates with you, don't hesitate to tap that like button and subscribe to our channel. Make sure you click the notification bell so you're always updated with more inspiring stories of God's love. Share this with someone who might need it. You never know how it could change their life for good.